and other civil society groups. This afternoon, our discussion will be 1 hour long. We are streaming live on all platforms for the government in Jamaica. Critically, though, we are live on the broadcasters in Rwanda. Rwanda is 7 hours ahead of Jamaica, so we will be live in Rwanda as well. We ask for those who will ask questions. We have one microphone in the auditorium, so we ask that you make your way to the microphone. You will indicate when it's time for you to ask your question. Once we indicate that it's time for you to ask your question, we ask that you identify yourself and where you represent, if you're a youth leader, if you're a parliamentarian, and then we ask you to ask your question as succinctly as possible. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being with us here today as we await the official start of our Think Jamaica 2022 Government to Government Dialogue.
No, stand by. Wait on me. I announce your minister. Republic of Rwanda, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a warm Jamaican welcome. In Rwanda, you say Muriweho, and in Jamaica, we say Wagwan. We are delighted to convene this very important government-to-government discussion entitled Think Jamaica 2022. I am Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica, and I am honored to be facilitating the discussion between our two brilliant leaders, Prime Minister Holness and President Kagame. It's 1 p.m. here in Jamaica, so we say good afternoon to our audience physically here and online with us in Jamaica, and good evening to our live audience in Rwanda, who are 7 hours ahead. Now please join me in welcoming the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, and His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Mr. Prime Minister, stand this side, please. Mr. President, just please.
I think we come together for a shot.
Can you come closer, please?
Mr. President. Mr. President, could you join me just a little? And we just take a photo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, President Kagame and his delegation are concluding a 3-day state visit to Jamaica. Mr. President, I trust you've been having an engaging and fruitful time.
Absolutely.
We know you needed longer, so you have to come back. President Kagame is a powerhouse of a president. He has presided over the strong socioeconomic development and advancement of Rwanda. Among his many roles, he has sat as chair of the African Union, the East African Community, and will shortly take the chair of the Commonwealth later this year. Considered one of the pearls of Africa, Rwanda is one of the continent's fastest growing economies. Under the clear and visionary leadership of President Kagame, this land of 1,000 hills has secured many milestones of environmental protection, innovation, and development. And we celebrate another particular milestone, Rwanda's achievement of the highest level of female parliamentary representation in the world. Mr. President, welcome. Prime Minister Andrew Holness is the first Jamaican Prime Minister to be born after independence, and indeed the youngest. He has had several achievements as Prime Minister, notably leading the resurgence of the Jamaican economy ahead of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fastest recovery in the region since. He's launched the most extensive infrastructure projects in Jamaica's history, highest investment in national security, and achieved the lowest unemployment rate ever. He has a passion for the environment, having sat as co-chair of the UN Secretary General's Climate Financing Initiative and having implemented the most extensive environmental protection measures ever in Jamaica, including declaration of the boundaries of Jamaica's cockpit country as a protected area. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, this visit is of special significance as it takes place during Jamaica's Diamond Jubilee, or 60th year of independence, and it represents an important opportunity for the deepening of bilateral relationships between Jamaica and Rwanda. It also reinforces the steadily burgeoning relationship between the Caribbean and the African continent, including between CARICOM and the AU. If you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to recognize that we have here in the audience that you represent indeed a wide cross-section of Jamaican society, including civil society, members of parliament, the church, and most importantly, our young people. We will take questions from our audience as well as some video questions from our friends in Rwanda and persons on the street in Jamaica. Because of time allotted, we ask those persons who will ask questions to be succinct and ask only one question per person. But first, I claim moderator's privilege to ask the first questions. Mr. President, on the matter of, and I'm here scrolling a little bit, on the matter of the connection and future role of the relationship between the African continent and the Caribbean. You have spoken of this and its potential. What are some of the things, the actions we can take in order to enhance the deepening of this connection?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be with you on this stage, Mr. Prime Minister, and thank you for the moderation. The Caribbean and Africa have a lot in common, beginning with the people. There is that deep connection that the geographical distance can't eliminate. So the first thing we have to do is create that environment and the possibility for people to travel, Caribbean, say to Rwanda and East Africa or other parts of Africa, and vice versa. So we have to deal with visa issues and make sure that we create waivers, and so that we really encourage this connection, knowing that we have interest in one another, we can benefit one another. There is a lot we can do, whether it is trade or different things. But we have to be very practical, start with the right first things first, which is first even to carry the message to people and say, why not? Why not connect as close as we can? So I think these are the practical things we have to do.
Absolutely, sir. Air services arrangements, visa connections, people-to-people exchanges, these are critical to deepening. Thank you, sir. Mr. Prime Minister, what would you say are perhaps the most important developmental lessons that Jamaica and even perhaps Rwanda have learned over the past 10 years as you've been doing some research? And how can these be applied to other countries to increase growth and equity?
A very important question. I think, Mr. President, again, thank you for visiting our country in our 60th year. and I'm sure you would have felt the warmth of the Jamaican people. Rwanda is a perfect example of a country that has overcome challenges and struggles, and they have done so remaining united. And I think that if you were to say what would be the lessons, it would be, first of all, resolving conflict. So a process of reconciliation. In every society, there will be divisions, there will be conflicts, there will be difficult issues, but the process of bringing everyone together in the society to resolve conflict and get the society singularly focused on development, I think that is a lesson for all countries. The other lesson is to be pragmatic. And I think if you were to describe President Kagame, you would say that he is pragmatic, he is instrumental, and he is deliberate in thought and action. And so leadership would be a very important part of any development of especially small countries. Leadership is so critical. But flowing from that leadership that is pragmatic is also an ethos of performance-based. And I think that is something that the Caribbean, the region, Jamaica, needs to adopt. Ensure that whatever policy you're putting in place, whatever system of rewards and benefits that you're going to have, ensure that it is tied and related to some outcome that is going to advance the shared prosperity of the entire country. And I think that is a perfect lesson that we would see coming out of everything that Rwanda has done. It is critically about the performance, setting targets and achieving them in an efficient way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Prime Minister. So conflict resolution, focused leadership, measurable outcomes, and performance-based management are sort of touch points for ensuring that a vision can be implemented. Thank you both very much. And if you'd allow me to now open the discussion with a few questions from our audience. We will take them in batches from the audience and then on video. I will start with 2 from our live audience before we take the videos, and I ask if you would introduce yourself before you ask your question. Or first.
Thank you. All protocols observed. Good afternoon. I am Yannick Tracy, and I am the co-chair of the National Youth Advisory Council of Jamaica. And I just want to say thank you for inviting all our young people here today. My question is, youth participation in government policy formulation and youth development has been a focal area of many conversations worldwide. What would be your advice to youth leaders that are demotivated due to no support and a low priority given to their cause? And do you believe that implementing government policies that ensure ministerial and overall government support to appointed young leaders to be something that should be considered a mandatory approach? The question will be posed to the Most Honorable Andrew Holness.
And what I would do is I would defer respectfully and ask our honored guest if he would take a shot at it, which would give me some time to think about it.
Well, here I think the young people we are talking about must be seen in the context of society and all people. But young people should be ready to learn and to take responsibilities. This one is not going to be handed to you, but rather you make an effort to make sure that you feel that sense of learning and responsibility, which therefore should propel you to that higher level where you take these responsibilities. So government, therefore, and government policies should be also making it easy and sensitive to the fact that everyone needs to feel they are participating or they are represented. That's why, therefore, let's say in the government, there is a need to have people of all ages, starting with the young people, so that they grow into that sort of situation where they learn, they take responsibility, and knowing that there are others coming behind, following in their footsteps. So policies must be sensitive to that. Leaders must be, and the connection should be complete if what I'm just saying is looked at critically.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Prime Minister, do you wish to offer view as well?
I'll endorse what President Kagame said. But just to say that the asset of youth is energy, and you should use that energy to acquire wisdom. And you acquire that wisdom over time by experience. And what we should try to do, the older ones, I'm not included in that, should give the opportunity, but not necessarily the easiest path, to create steps that our youth can trod and elevate themselves, but they must have that energy, that desire, that drive to achieve, experience, and gain wisdom. And that's what we've tried to do, which is why we have made sure that there is an avenue for your participation in an event like this.
Excellent. Thank you, Prime Minister. So learning and responsibility, and of course, energy and experience and the willingness, again, to go through a path in order to be able to best execute leadership at the appropriate time. Thank you both, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. Our next question, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is O'Neill Grant. I am the President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association and a Vice President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions and a membership of the National Partnership Council. My question this afternoon is, how has Rwanda dealt with restoring its public sector after the turmoil that the country had undergone? Thank you.
Well, in our situation, say in 1994, we started from scratch. And in fact, what started right from the beginning was the public sector. The private sector was, first of all, at a low level or non-existent, and then whatever little there was eradicated, was removed by the events that happened in '94. So, but because there was political responsibility on those of us who inherited this mess, we tried to put together a team of leaders in different sectors to try and resuscitate the public sector, and from there everything else that would follow. And again, there's something that will always be helpful. It is to look in the eyes of people and give them hope and say, you are part of this. It's a fight, it's a struggle. It doesn't matter your background, you should be part of it, and you have something to offer. There's not anybody else going to do that for you, but we need to do it for ourselves. So that's why we started, starting with the security, which was lacking, the police. We already had fighters, for example, on our side who had taken over the situation. And Then we thought of schools. Where do people go for health? You know, how do farmers get to be helped by government institutions? And that's how the public sector started forming up. And we had to do it very quickly because there was dire need for that. And as we were doing that, leadership and governance and organization, these matter a lot. You do it in a sense, as I said, when you bring in everybody, you also want everybody to start trusting in the leadership, in each other, as to what they are doing, and what goals really are they clear that they are driving toward. So it was a complex situation where, you know, the whole society had to do soul searching, you know, to what is it that we can do? How do we do it? With whom do we do it? And how do we move from this very low point to and start bringing normalcy in life of communities? So then from there we started building, and we did very fast. But from the beginning, there was that sense of trying to be efficient. Whatever little resources were at our disposal, we had to make sure for every dollar you did what it was worth. And for everyone doing something, they had to feel a sense of accountability. You have to do what you are doing, but in the end, you have to show results. And that's when accountability kicked in. So when looking back 28 years ago, we find that that accountability process was built from the start, and actually is responsible for every step of progress we made all this time. And therefore, in public service, there is that sense of, there is a culture that has emerged that started that time. Yes, a sense of urgency, a sense of accountability, and a sense of efficiency. And the leaders will always have to be there to ensure that all the pieces fit in with each other.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. So a shared vision, shared understanding, accountability at every step of the way, and involvement, a sense of purpose, everyone being a part of the process.
So you're not going to ask me?
Prime Minister. I think this was a specific question, so we're going to leave this one with President Kagame.
No, but there are just two other words that we need to emphasize.
Of course.
Urgency.
Urgency.
And efficiency.
Indeed. Indeed.
So accountability, urgency, and efficiency.
And inclusion, absolutely. Thank you very much, Prime Minister and Mr. President. It is now our pleasure to move to those persons who are joining us online, and we will take our first video question.
Jamaica and the Caribbean nations are known for shaping their unique identity through cultural diversity. What lessons should Rwanda and African nations learn from them?
I believe, Mr. President, perhaps you could take the first. This one comes from Rwanda, and then Mr. Prime Minister, or would you?
Well, I'll give the President some time to think of the answer.
All right, so you go, Mr. Prime Minister, please.
It's a good question. For the Caribbean region, particularly Jamaica, we see culture as an important asset, an important tool in our economic development. So the first thing I would say is that we need to figure out a mechanism to, first of all, protect the intellectual property that is involved in our culture, and then to monetize it. And then to do that in a way that does not lessen the value, the intrinsic value of the culture. I think that is really the challenge. And I think that has to do a lot with how the society embraces the culture through strategic things such as training, which is not always the case, but training is very important, and exposure, the platforms that we create to exhibit and to give our culture that showcase. And for Jamaica, music is such an important part of our culture. More than that, it is now a part of our identity. And so for us, we need to embrace it, take greater ownership of it, help to increase the intrinsic value of it, but at the same time, try to monetize it so that it can genuinely, truly reflect as part of our national output.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Do you have a perspective, Mr. President?
Well, I add to your statement, Prime Minister, culture, and then, I mean, things that are identical to this beautiful country, Jamaica. It's just not culture, it's also sport. I think they come together and in a very good package. But let me say culture and diversity are key and important ingredients in innovation and creativity, which in the end actually tie well into the development of economies. And so there is a lot to learn from one another. There's a lot for us in Africa to learn from Jamaica and the Caribbean. And in fact, diversity also, even in culture, create need and environment for respect of the other. And through that, you can rise to greater heights. So it's innovation, it's creativity, it's respect, it's how this can form a very solid foundation for economies and societies to develop.
Wonderful. Thank you both. The social aspect, the economic aspect, and of course, the socioeconomic perspectives are critical for us to keep at the center of our discussions on culture and their deep value and intrinsic potential to both our nations and indeed the continent. I believe we now have our second question by video, again from Rwanda, if I understand.
This is a question for the President of Rwanda. With 60% of the members of your lower house of representatives being women, what advice do you have for countries like Jamaica that want to increase female representation and participation in politics?
Well, I want to share with you our experience, and I'm sure things may work in one place and not in another, or others work everywhere you apply them. But I just describe to you what we did to reach that point where women in the past in our country were not considered, where there was a lot of inequality and so on. So what we do is really look at legislation, first look at the need, the problem, and then you legislate to make sure that the laws that are put in place are sensitive to that. But laws alone will not deliver anything. You have to make sure that there is not only that intent, but also the mechanism to make sure that what you put in place is going to work to deliver what you wanted in the first place. So we worked through the registration first because we understood the need and what we were doing. Then we also created a mechanism. We have a gender monitoring office in the government, which works across the board to make sure that the policies and the implementation part of things are actually in place and happening as we intended to achieve. So at every year, there is a report provided, and we go back and test things and say, to see whether what we intended to do has been done or that was achieved as we intended. So, and then there is education. You don't take anything for granted. We say we want to empower women, we want to do this. Just talking about it and legislating and also monitoring is not enough. You still have to have efforts of outreach. You go to the communities and explain to women, and it even takes some reminding that this is a place for women too. It's not for, because we're in fact everywhere, but even in our case, we are used to leaving women behind. And sometimes they would not complain. It's like they also think that's normal. So we've made sure that men, women as well, understand that this is not normal to leave any section of our society behind. And that's how we got to that point.
Thank you so very much, Mr. President. I saw our minister responsible for gender nodding emphatically as you spoke. So it's important for us as women to see ourselves as leaders. It's important to remind men and women that women belong in all spaces, including decision-making spaces, and of course, ensuring that there's reporting and measuring and monitoring and evaluation assists in implementation of every policy together with public education. So these are great guidelines for us to follow, and I see violent agreement in the audience. If we could now take our next question, Minister Green.
Thank you. Floyd Green, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, would focus on our national identification system and digital transformation. President, Rwanda has been a leader in Africa in relation to digitization and innovation, and you've really used that to transform your economy. Could you share with us probably the 3 critical factors that drove that digitization process in Rwanda? Thank you.
The first was the understanding and realization of the need itself. And for example, Rwanda is a landlocked country, and that means a lot, and it creates a lot of challenges, and we had to think of how do we break out of this landlockedness which affects us. So connectivity was one important thing on the agenda, that we need to be connected. We need to connect with each other. We need to connect with the rest of the world. And then this connectivity itself delivers, as we said earlier, efficiency, whether it is in agriculture, it's in health, it's education, it's name it. That is one comparing factor why you had to look at that. But now thinking about that and the need, and then, so you have to think about the drivers. There are things that connectivity is based on. One is the infrastructure. Also then the skills, if you have to apply it to different sectors for that to be more productive. So infrastructure, skills, combined with the urgent need for us to connect. And in fact, that very wide sector constitutes business in itself. It supports innovation, it supports everything that drives and makes society thrive.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. President. So we hear it clear when you can see issues as a challenge, being landlocked, or you see it as an opportunity to create an industry and an entire ecosystem around connectivity, the business aspects, the infrastructural aspects, and of course, developing the skill sets, which include human capacity development. So excellent lessons to learn once more as we take our next question. Lisa.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Hanno. I am the opposition spokesperson for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the Member of Parliament for Southeast Sentan. Prime Minister, good afternoon, Minister. Mr. President, it's a pleasure to have you in Jamaica, sir. Welcome. You have said that as a part of your mission, you want to develop deeper ties, bilateral ties with Jamaica and certainly the region. And those have to do with trade and other aspects that can be mutually beneficial to both our countries. What do you think in the short term and medium term that success would look like for you between our two nations?
Well, in the short term, I think we are there. And that's why I'm here. I think we've started the journey. So we just need to discuss, immediately touch those key points that can deliver some quick wins for Jamaica and Rwanda working together, and they are there. And then medium term is because we have to work on certain things, but I think the more we get together, if the government officials from both sides meet and put a working program in place, say we can provide this, we can deliver this, and each side has what to work on. I think we can move quickly and start seeing results. It's all possible, but it starts now. It started yesterday when I arrived, and so I think the rest will be easier.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator, if I could break your protocol and just to make the point.
Of course, Mr. Prime Minister.
That the President mentioned being a landlocked country and using connectivity through information technology and the internet as a means of connecting to the globe, though being landlocked. Similar concern being an island. So the power of connectivity, it's very important to development. And so the digital transformation of the society is the next frontier of development, which our society needs to understand. And I think if you were to compare the development in Rwanda versus development in Jamaica, you would see that the great appreciation for the digitization of the society, meaning converting, as many of our administrative, bureaucratic processes into a virtual digital form, allows us to be able to make connections that are similar to trade connections, but virtually, to distribute value over the virtual network. And so a part of what we will be seeing as the short term, what we discussed, is how we can accelerate our own digital process in line with what Rwanda is doing. So that, for example, we can collaborate on science and engineering, which are two gaps in our society. But we have similar problems, similar outlooks. We relate to each other as equals, and we can find our own solutions. So I just wanted to make that connection, that this thrust to create the digital society It's not, a fad or a fashion or because everybody's talking about the digital society. It is very important as the next frontier of development, the next frontier of being able to connect with the world, with partners, so that we can collaborate and solve local problems.
Absolutely. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And Lisa, I will be happy to share some of the very exciting things that we have discussed, because there is indeed a long list of the quick wins of which the President spoke of. And of course, there is much even beyond that in the medium to long. So look forward to discussing those with you as we take our next video question, which comes to us again from Rwanda. Please.
What other sectors could benefit from the cooperation between Rwanda and Jamaica?
What are the sectors? Who wishes to take that first?
Well, we've just talked about information technology, cyber, tourism, agriculture. We didn't spend too much time in bilaterals on education, but the President and myself, we spoke about education. And I think there could be mutual benefit in exchanging through our universities, particularly in engineering, cyber, agriculture, and, believe it or not, space technologies, which is something that we need to look at very seriously, certainly in terms of satellite communications and industries that are auxiliary to that.
Mr. President, would you wish?
I think that all of these are areas that, for example, in education side, we know we have Carnegie Mellon University, Africa, based in Kigali. We have African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, based in Kigali. That all the two I'm talking about serve the whole continent, like the Carnegie Mellon University of Engineering brings in so far 21 countries of our continent, of Africa, represented there, and still young people. So people from Jamaica could be part of that. And I said the Institute of Mathematical Sciences is there. We can collaborate on that. Space technology, as the Prime Minister said, we've already made some progress. We could partner and bring in Jamaica to be part of us. And in fact, right now, there are these big projects we are pursuing. We are also, towards the end of this year, we will be manufacturing vaccines and of different types using mRNA technology in partnership with BioNTech, the German company. So digitization is part of all this, and engineering is part of all this. And these are things we can partner in without any hindrance or without taking too much time.
Thank you, Mr. President and Prime Minister. And I know my counterparts are taking note that our principals have added to our list, which was already long. But it's wonderful because it shows the breadth of the potential that exists. If we could now take the next video question, which comes from Jamaica.
The Republic of Rwanda is considered one of the cleanest countries in the world. In what ways could Rwanda partner with Jamaica to move in a similar direction?
It's again, in our case, how we started was here an issue of mindset change. And this can happen anywhere and can even happen better and faster with the partnership. Once there is this mindset change that there are things we can do for ourselves that are beneficial. In fact, to quickly give you an example, in our own country, when we started this program of Umuganda, cleaning up and working together and elimination of plastics across our country, and which started way back, more than 15 years ago. We would tell our people, and even some leaders, that while in Rwanda we have needed the donor communities to provide funds for education, for health, for this in partnership, do we really need any help or any money to just clean our homestead? This is what we... So, yeah, we always saw, when I'm sure everyone, when we were young kids, in our homes, we used to see our mothers or aunties, and doing cleaning up around the homestead. Why don't we do it where we live? Why don't we do it for our country? Why don't we? So you can look at the homestead as a form of our country, with the population as families that inhabit that homestead. So here again, it's a sharing of experience and best practices, and people locking in onto saying these are things we can do, and they are important and they make sense, and why don't we do them?
Absolutely. Mindset change. Thank you, Mr. President. Mindset change. So, Prime Minister, do you have a view on the Umuganda program, or?
I mean, the simple thing is just to say ditto.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I totally endorse. But just goes back to the point of just being very practical, very deliberate, and just getting things done on a performance-based basis, and recognizing the urgency of the situation. And more than that, recognizing that we have agency. We can do it for ourselves. We should own the problem, and we can do our little part in our little community, which will have an impact nationally, which is the essence of the Umuganda program. Each person doing their part for their community and for their country.
Absolutely, wonderful. So we don't have to wait for Labor Day, Prime Minister. We can do it for ourselves. We can recognize it. Absolutely. We're looking forward to taking our next question from the floor. So welcome, sir.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donovan Wignall, member of the Partnership Council and president of the MSME Alliance. My question is for President Kagame. What are the major driving forces behind your country's remarkable success in moving its GDP from 6.12 billion in 2010 to 10.38 billion in 2020, over 68% growth?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The major drivers of our GDP have been agriculture, services, manufacturing. Because if you look at agriculture alone, it employs about 70% of our adult population. And so what we did, therefore, was to try and add value to that, to whatever we are doing, whether it is production of coffee, tea, and in fact, we are in Rwanda, we are food self-sufficient. We even produce just the local consumption. There is sufficient food, and we export to our neighbors. And then we export these high-value crops like coffee, tea, and get money from that. Then tourism, of course, is another part that has been driving our GDP and growing it very fast. Our tourism is necessarily going to be different from, let's say, our neighbors. Maybe it could be different from what you have here, but of course there are always going to be similarities. We are a small country, very densely populated. We have about 450 people per square kilometer. It's a small country, relatively big population. We are 13 plus minus 13 million. So that's already high for a very small country. Just 26, they say it is the size of Maryland. That is 26,338 square kilometers. You pack in 13. So we have to always choose. So in tourism, we have selected high-end tourism. The offering is unique, is precious, so people pay high for it. Like mountain gorillas, visit with mountain gorillas. The mountain gorillas are very rare. In fact, that area where they are, Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, where the borders meet, that's the sanctuary. And that's the only place where you can find them in the whole world. And they're also very few. So it helps us to put a premium. Just visiting with a gorilla for 30 minutes, up close, 7 meters away, you don't get closer. for mainly the health of the gorillas, because they are like they're just like us. They get infected with disease and so on. So they are very highly protected. And then you have to pay a few thousands of dollars. Then even in other places, they are well protected, they are clean, they are safe, the animals are, highly protected. So going there fetches, that premium we're talking about. So tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, the services, all these have driven our economy very fast.
Excellent. And of course, domestic food sufficiency is part of that foundation, exporting at the high end and providing the unique value proposition in respect of tourism. It's wonderful, wonderful for us to learn from. Our next question comes from the floor.
Senator Natalie Campbell Rodriguez. Good afternoon, PM Mirue, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Minister Johnson Smith. So my question is for President Kagame. Rwanda prides itself on creating homegrown solutions to problems to facilitate growth and development. Of the homegrown solutions, such as Imihigo, which you referenced when you spoke about accountability, which two in your mind have had the greatest impact or will potentially have the greatest impact, and why do you think so?
Well, I think it's not one approach or one single thing that is going to deliver. In fact, you find different efforts deliver well because they are connected. So the innovations we have created, like the performance-based management, which earlier the Prime Minister referred to and the moderator. Imihigo means that. Imihigo means for example, in our country, the districts, we have 30 districts of the country, and in governance, we are highly decentralized. These districts tend to manage their economy, part of it, first before we centralize it at the top. So we put them into a process of competition to deliver on certain goals the government has already, and which they have contributed to as well. Whether it is, as you said, education, health, gender, equality, cleanliness and environmental protection, different things. So they compete. And every end of the year, there is scoring on this performance. And so Buhiga is to say you will reach your target. Yes, and therefore we see how In fact, it is very interesting because in that process of competition, some districts come number one most of the time, but none comes first all the time. In fact, you find those who did not perform well this year, they work so hard and next year they become among the top. But the whole thing is really to be able to register results based on what we have agreed, and also that sense of accountability we talked about. So the innovations that we have put in place is not a single one that has delivered everything or that is always at the top all the time. But they are important, and they are important because they happen across the board almost at the same time. You find one supports the other. Like the Mihigo mentioned, they help people to perform according to what has been agreed that it needs to be done.
If I might ask claim moderator's privilege just to ask a follow-up on that. Is it that the districts are incentivized in winning? Does the district receive extra funding or any benefit, or is it just the sense of accountability and duty to deliver that plays against each other? Yeah. Which would you say?
That's an important question, but there is accountability and a sense to delivering. That's key. But the other also is there are revenues, there are resources that are already in each district. But the central government also tops up for the district. Now, the whole idea is to say, did you deliver on the promise for what you had of your own revenues and what we added? And of course, there is an inherent sort of accountability in the sense that, well, if you are not delivering, you had the resources, you are given extra, and you didn't deliver. So people cannot give you more resources when you are not delivering. So they have to so they have to make sure that they deliver and therefore merit more resources.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very interesting lessons to be learned. Thank you, Mr. President, for accommodating my follow-up question. As we now go to the next question in person. Janice.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister and Mr. President. I'm Senator Janice Allen, and I'm from Montego Bay, the tourism capital of Jamaica, and I'm the opposition spokesperson on tourism. So your mention of tourism just now and the focus that Rwanda has had in placing on the luxury market and also, from what I've seen and read, the MICE market, the major investments in those areas. If I might ask, Mr. President, what can you say, or how can you outline for me what accounts for the significant investments that we have seen in Rwanda's tourism development, and how do you determine the types of investments and monitor to ensure that the benefits directly redound to the communities in which these developments do take place?
Right. I'll give you even a quick sense of where we started from. Because our private sector was weak, and it was more from the beginning, more or less things were being done by government all the time. Government started by investing, say, in hotels. We didn't have hotels that would accommodate even ordinary people traveling to Rwanda and are looking for good places to stay, or later on hold conferences. We wouldn't have that. Instead of waiting for the private sector to deliver on that, which is the right thing otherwise to do, the government invested in that and then asked the government to buy the assets. But if we had waited for the private sector and told them, so, build a hotel here, build a hotel there, because there is this justification, the private sector puts their money where they want, not where you tell them to do. But if you have something up and running, it is easy now to go to the private sector and say, can you buy this? Because it makes sense. And they will be the first to see that it makes sense, so they will buy it. So that's how we started. We started by realizing, as we scanned around what could be offered and how, and what would bring the best offering for it, we invested. And then after that, we would sell to the private sector, we would privatize and pour out. So we kept doing it so many times, and including government-built conferences. The Prime Minister, you will see when you visit us, sir, during CHOGM. Well, most of those things were built by government, but in the end, the government passes them on to the private sector. And so our tourism is, apart from the beauty of the country and what it had to offer, as I told you, well, the game reserves, the big five, the gorillas, and so on. Then there is also the luxury part of it, having good hotels in those places so that those who have the money can go and stay there. Then you have built conferences. So many conferences are taking place in our capital and even other towns, and it becomes part of attraction. And therefore, this is really how we built up our tourism sector on that basis.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are now at the point that I'm sure no one in here wanted us to reach, which is where I declare that it has indeed been my honor to have facilitated this discussion, adding to greater understanding and greater perspectives on several issues of mutual interest. I hope that we can soon see the benefits of safety, economic growth, and even greater political stability in our countries as we continue on a path and as indeed, as we both share in the vision of our leaders to become shining stars in the world, although I kind of feel that we are already. I want to wish you all, thank you so much for joining us, and I want to wish you all a peaceful, prosperous, and productive future. We have leaders in here, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Ministers, young ones and less young. So we wish everyone productive futures, blessed Easters, and thank you again so much for being here with us, both in this room and online. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for sharing your thoughts with us. That just as if we could all just remain seated while we allow the members of the Youth Advisory Council to join the President and Prime Minister on stage for a photo opportunity, and then of course we could allow their excellencies to depart as we bring the state visit to a close. Thank you so much for your patience and your kind and deliberate attention. Thank you.